Hello everyone, this is City for All, and today I wanna make a little bit new type of video for me, and it will be a review of different news from the field of urbanism. So I hope it will be interesting to you and you will like and share, subscribe, and so let's get started. And I would like to start with the fact that Israeli city Tel Aviv recently launched the first line of its high-speed tram. It was under construction since 2011 for 12 years and the construction cost reached $3 billion. And it turned out to be so expensive because it includes a 10-kilometer tunnel under the city center. The launch of this line was postponed many times, but finally this opening happened, and this red line should be the first of three, and in the future Tel Aviv has planned to get a whole system of high-speed trams, which should become a backbone of its public transport. The wagons on this line are produced by Chinese company CRRC and they are armored just like the trams in Jerusalem. I think that we can be happy for Tel Aviv that it is developing the public transport system, and its example is very indicative in the sense that even in such difficult security conditions it is possible to develop public transport. The next news is from Japan, and it's a little bit similar to the previous one. It is about the fact that in Japan, in the city of Utsunomiya, they also had launched a new tram line. And the interesting thing is that this is the first new tram line in Japan in the last 75 years. It is not about reconstruction or maybe extending of some existing system, but about the completely new tram system. There hasn't been anything like this in Japan for 75 years, and I'm honestly a little bit shocked about this fact. And it's also interesting because if you look at the tram itself, it looks quite modern and it's very different from what other trams in Japan look like. I've never been to Japan myself, but from what I've seen, most Japanese trams are quite short and boxy. But this one looks more like what you are used to see in Europe, in France for example, which I have a video about on my channel here. So in this respect, for Japan, this is a step forward. This line was under construction since 2018 and it cost $467 million, which is much cheaper than Israeli line. But it's logical as far as it has no tunnels and it's a little bit shorter. It's 14.5 kilometers long and goes from the train station in Utsunomiya to a neighboring small town Haga, and there are also plans to expand it 5 kilometers more in the future. And what is also interesting about this is that the city took a very responsible approach to the opening of this tram line in terms of informing the residents. They've put special flyers in the mailboxes of all the residents which fully described how to use the tram, where to buy tickets, how to interact with it, how pedestrians, passengers, car drivers should interact with it, and so on. But on the other hand, if you look at this photo for example, you can see that this street have no greenery at all. There are only asphalt and concrete. So in this respect, probably if I had any influence on this project, I would try to make it more people-friendly and plant some greenery and some trees. But still, it's a very good news that a new tram lines are also appearing in Japan. It remained only to change the approach to the street planning a little bit. The capital of Argentina, Buenos Aires, is now faced with a situation where the tourist flow has begun to grow after the COVID restrictions. And at the same time, due to the weakening of the national currency, it has become more profitable for apartment owners to rent this housing to tourists for dollars than to local residents for long-term rent for pesos. This leads to such an unpleasant situation when it becomes simply impossible and unprofitable for many ordinary residents of Buenos Aires to find housing for rent because it becomes very expensive in general. This situation has been faced by many tourist cities in the world, Venice and Barcelona for example, and many others, which at some point began to realize that the large tourist flow was harming them and making the city difficult to live in for the locals. So on the one hand, tourism is good for the local economy up to some point, but after a certain level it begins to harm the locals themselves. And in Buenos Buenos Aires, it's even more complicated by the fact that the local currency is quite weak and there are two exchange rates, official and unofficial, and this further imposes certain difficulties for the locals. I really don't know what the local authorities can do to get out of this situation, but I hope that they will somehow manage to change it, because it can end very badly for the locals. In Lviv, Ukraine, a school building is being built using a 3D printer. It is a small 500 square meters building for first graders, and the walls themselves were built in 48 hours. It is being built by a Danish company COBOD International with the support of the Humanitarian Foundation Team for Ukraine. And as they say, the main purpose of this 3D printing is not to make construction cheaper, but to speed it up. Although, of course, after the walls are built, a lot of time will still need to be spent on all the interior works. In general, the opening is scheduled for January 1st. From architectural point of view, this building looks quite distinctive because of this texture on the walls and rounded corners. And also interesting point was that when the walls were under construction, there was a live broadcast from the construction site on the internet, and everybody could see how the walls are growing. Well, that's all for a moment. And if you would like to see videos like this in the future, then offer your news for review in the comments. Thanks for watching and see you in the next videos.